Morning starting at 8.
When you've got questions, he always has an answer. It's Sean Hannity this afternoon at 2, right before Joe Walsh at 5 on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Well, there's a lot of competition this week with Rashida Tlaib's ahistorical pronouncements on the Middle East, but it's tough to beat this clip. Acacio Cortez and her Truman Show of a Life, everything videoed for your enjoyment, showing off her new bougie apartment, as she called it, and some of its features.
I am told this is a garbage disposal. I've never seen a garbage disposal. I never had one in any place I've ever lived. It is terrifying. I don't know what to use it for or what its purpose is. Like food scraps? Like, is this environmentally sound? I don't know.
I mean, it's so, her voice is so annoying, but also the content of what she's saying. Put your hand down the disposal, turn it on and see what happens.
You know what? She should offer a books on tape series like AOC reads the great works of the West. Like, I want her to read...
what do you want her to read out loud?
Hamlet.
Okay.
The way Shakespeare intended it to be read.
Well, in her defense, I guess their garbage disposals were outlawed in New York City in the 70s or something. But, I mean, hello.
Basically, not since she's been on the planet,
right.
Number one. Number two, you don't need to possess something to understand its existence and function.
Next week, it'll be a washer and dryer. What is it? I wash my clothes by hand. I don't know what this is. Is this environmentally sound?
Uh-huh. This is the left's offering for your environmental protection czar. Okay? Just put that in your pipe and smoke it so long as it's environmentally friendly. Acacio Cortez also had a little rally for her GND. I think she was a bit miffed that her fellow house freshmen Spice Girls Tlaib and Omar were getting more ink. So she changed that. Here's what she had to offer about, TikTok, the world coming to an end.
We cannot, and we will not accept anything less than a solution to save ourselves, and that's exactly what this is. You know, when we talk about the path forward, I wish that as a leader, I could give you comfort about our future. I wish that as a public servant, I can come here and tell you that everything's going to be all right. But I can't tell you that today because I'm not interested in lying to you. But frankly, there is no reason for us to be comfortable right now. We are at 4:15. 4:15. There is no reason for us to be comfortable. And I'm not here to guarantee to you that everything will be okay.
Did she say 4:15? We're at 4:15?
Oh, my God.
Why didn't anybody tell us we're at 4? Here's what 4:15 means.
It was reported today that this weekend, for the first time in human history, we have reached atmospheric levels of carbon at 415 parts per million.
Everybody run for your lives!
Where's the 415 siren?
All right. How does this Godzilla movie end? For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Bjorn Lomborg. He's the director of the Copenhagen Consensus think tank. He's the author of Cool It and The Skeptical Environmentalist. And we're going to see if we can infuse some, facts, science, economics into this discussion. Bjorn, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, Dan, it's great to be back.
So I won't query you about the garbage disposal and its environmental friendliness. We'll just wait till we get the report back from AOC on that. But what about 415 points per million of carbon particles and that signaling the end? Maybe we are back on that 12-year path to extinction.
Well, it's important to sort of get a sense of proportion, as you also alluded to. Look, global warming is a real problem, but it's by no means the end of the world, as AOC likes to point out, and a lot of other people will tell you. So we are at 515 ppm right now, and yes, that is unprecedented. But let's also remember pretty much everything else we have in the world is unprecedented. We've never had as few kids die from easily curable infectious diseases. We've never had so many people well fed. We've never had so much light and electricity. There's no end to all the things that we've blown out of the water because we're an advanced civilization. Now, there's still problems, and global warming is one of them. But just to give you a sense of proportion, the UN estimate that if we don't do anything about global warming, if we just let it go, towards the 2070s, the total cost, so all the impacts that you're worrying about and all the impacts that AOC is worrying about, by the 2070s will be equivalent to losing what is equivalent to your income of 0.2 to 2%. So 0.2 to 2%, that's a small recession. That's not nothing, but it's certainly not the end of the world. So yes, let's by all means talk about how we fix it smartly, but let's not run around like chickens with no heads.
Well, but wait a second. Yeah, I may only lose 2% of my income in 2070, but that won't mean much because I'll be dead in 2031.
You have that planned out.
Yeah, he did. He does the math real
The
quick
combination
there,
of
Bjorn.
AOC's predictions and those Netflix algorithms predicting when I'm going to have a heart attack, I got it pretty much nailed, yeah.
Sure, yeah. So, yeah, and the 12 years is just simply a mirage, if you will. It comes from the fact that some people were very worried about global warming, so they said, what would it take to limit temperature rises to 1.5 degrees centigrade, which is about 2.8 degrees Fahrenheit? So that's a nice question. It also, we already knew the answer. It would be almost impossible. Now, they asked the UN climate panel. They spent a year. They came back with a thick report and basically said it is going to be near impossible. If you want to do this, you only have 12 years to turn the entire world around 180 degrees and do everything right. And so what many people have said is, oh, see, now the UN is telling us we only have 12 years. No, the UN has told you you only have 12 years if you want to do something that's incredibly inefficient and almost impossible to do. That's not the same thing as saying that you should do it. Actually, there's a good argument for why that would be not only impossible, but also incredibly wasteful of human resources.
So carbon dioxide levels just hit 415. So what does that mean? And should we be alarmed as AOC is?
Well, we certainly shouldn't be that alarmed. Look, it's a problem. There's a lot of problems around the world. And again, I work in the climate economics field, and I think the right way to look at this is to say global warming will have some problems. Like we will probably not have more hurricanes, but we'll have stronger hurricanes towards the end of the century. So we actually estimate that instead of 0.01% of global GDP being lost to global warming, to global hurricanes, it'll be 0.02%. That's a problem. But remember, it's still down from today where it's 0.04. And let's also just take a step back and realize it's a very small number compared to global GDP. And also remember, by the end of the century, we will all be somewhere between 6 and 30 times richer than we are per person. So this is a world where we'll be much better off. Our kids will survive much more. They'll have much more food and education, pretty much all the other great things. And then there is a problem that is promising to steal somewhere between, the 0.2 and 2%, or in 2100, maybe even 4% of that income. That's a problem. But the real issue here is to make sure that we don't end up spending, 10, 20, 30, 40% of our GDP to avoid that relatively small problem. And there's a good risk that people are making these arguments that want to spend lots more and that actually want to really make this world much less good world by the end of the century. Now, for all good reasons, all good intentions, they certainly want to do this because they're well-intentioned, but their outcome could be a little bit like when your wrist hurt and then you end up chopping off your arm in order to cure that. That's not a good solution.
Are all these people telling these ghost stories around a campfire like AOC, are they well-intentioned, or are they essentially compromised by their pursuit of money or power? The scientists by money, grant money, power, obviously the politicians. Because, I mean, what scientist believes the end is 12 years? And why does it take, if she was only, using that as sort of a frame of reference to rally people to the urgency, then why take so long to clarify it? She's been talking about it for 2 years. She clarified it last week.
Well, I don't know AOC. I've met a lot of these politicians. I've talked to Al Gore and many others. My understanding, and look, this may just be naive me, but my understanding is most of these people are really well intentioned. The point is not, and I think it's also much more useful to not doubt that people actually want to try to do good. I think people on both sides of the aisle want to do good, but the point is to emphasize that the actual policies that they're promoting are policies that are going to do very little to fix global warming, but that are going to be fairly costly. And that's a bad idea in a world where we only have limited resources and so many other problems that we want to tackle.
Well, also,
so I think we can get them to, go ahead.
Well, also, too, though, they don't listen to anybody. They're zealots. So there's something else at play here. And I get you don't want to get into the attentions game. I respect that. I get that. But, I mean, there was this piece in Commune magazine this week by somebody who's of the left, sees global warming, climate change as a problem. But it was critical of the Green New Deal, and he just took it from a very realistic perspective. One aspect of it, the environmental damage that you would do with the mining required to even attempt to get to a completely renewable energy economy in terms of all of the minerals that need to be mined to support the production of solar panels and all of the other renewable energy windmills and all of the other renewable energy sources. It's just not realistic. It's silly. But there is no conversation that is either based in what is possible or what is past scientific, like the muster of the scientific method, what makes economic sense in a world of scarcity, as you're describing. None of those discussions are in play with some of the politicians you mentioned, and we could go through many others.
Yeah, and you're probably right. I mean, I would again tend to say it's probably true that we can't actually get to 100% renewable. We're certainly not going to get there in this century. And many smart people are saying that. Even Al Gore's chief scientific advisor, Jim Hansen, has said, only people who believe the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny would believe such a thing. So I think there's a broad understanding of this. I think most of these people would say, well, at least it pushes us some of the way. And that's where I would argue, well, some of the way to where? It's a place where we will essentially end up with many more people paying much more for their power. That may mostly hurt poor people. A lot of people around the world are actually what they call energy poor. That is, they spend so much of their money on buying this fairly expensive energy because of our green worries that they end up not being able to keep themselves cool or keep themselves warm enough, and they actually die more from that. That's not innocent. And again, the point is, if you keep pushing that, what you're going to end up with is not a green revolution. You're going to end up with a revolution as what you saw in France. You're going to get the yellow vests protesting and saying, no, we don't want any more of this. And then, of course, you'll be nowhere. And so what we've tried to argue is if you actually look at this from an economic point of view, the only right way to try and tackle global warming is to do what America has done for hundreds of years. You solve problems through innovation. Imagine if we could innovate green energy to be cheaper than fossil fuels. We would have solved the problem, and we would actually give a lot more people access to better energy. It's through innovation you solve problems. Remember, the food scares back in the 70s and 60s, we wouldn't be able to feed the world. The solution wasn't to tell people, oh, I'm sorry, could you eat a little less? The solution was the green revolution that allowed everyone to feed themselves by producing more on every acre of land. So the simple point here is it's innovation. It's not scaring people off, but it's realizing that human ingenuity can actually solve this, as we have with many other problems.
He is Bjorn Lomborg, director of the Copenhagen Consensus think tank, author of Cool It and Skeptical Environmentalists. He's got a piece in the Daily Caller comparing climate change to an alien invasion. Bjorn Lomborg, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, great.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.